Learning not to be unhappy, a tough assignment. It is not easy to think in new ways. You are accustomed to a certain set of thoughts and the debilitating thoughts that follow. It requires a great deal of work to unlearn all of the habits of thought you have assimilated until now. Happiness is easy, but learning not to be unhappy can be difficult. Happiness is a natural condition of being a person. The evidence is plainly visible when you look at young children. What is tough is unlearning all of the shoulds and oughts that you've digested in the past. Taking charge of yourself begins with awareness. Catch yourself when you say things like, "He hurt my feelings." Remind yourself what you're doing at the moment you're doing it. New thinking requires awareness of the old thinking. You have become habituated in mental patterns that identify the causes of your feelings as outside of yourself. You have put in thousands of hours of reinforcement for such thinking, and you'll need to balance the scale with thousands of hours of new thinking that assumes responsibility for your own feelings. It is tough, damn tough, but so what? That certainly is no reason to avoid doing it. Think back to the time you were learning to drive a stick-shift automobile. You were faced with what seemed to be an insurmountable problem. 3 pedals, but only 2 feet to make them work. You first became aware of the complexity of the task, let the clutch out slow, oops, too fast, jerky business. Gas pedal down at the same rate as you release the clutch, right foot for the brake, but the clutch must go in or you jerk again. A million mental signals, always thinking, using your brain. What do I do? Awareness. And then after thousands of trials, mistakes, new efforts, the day comes when you step into your car and drive away. No stalling, no jerking, and no thinking. Driving a stick shift has become second nature, and how did you do it? With great difficulty, lots of present moment thinking, reminding, working. You know how to regulate your mind when it comes to accomplishing physical tasks, such as teaching your hands and feet to coordinate for driving. The process is less well known but identical in the emotional world. You've learned the habits you now have by reinforcing them all of your life. You get unhappy, angry, hurt, and frustrated automatically because you learned to think that way a long time ago. You have accepted your behavior and never worked at challenging it, but you can learn to not be unhappy, angry, hurt, or frustrated, just as you learn to be all those self-defeating things. For example, you've been taught that going to the dentist is a nasty experience and one that is associated with pain. You've always felt that it is unpleasant, and you even say things to yourself like, "I hate that drill." But these are all learned reactions. You could make the whole experience work for rather than against you by choosing to make it a pleasant, exciting procedure. You could, if you really decided to use your brain, make the sound of the drill signal a beautiful sexual experience, and each time the brrr sound appeared, you could train your mind to envision the most orgiastic moment of your life. You could think something different about what you used to call pain and choose to feel something new and pleasurable. How much more exciting and fulfilling to take charge and master your own dental world environment than to hang on to the old images and just endure. Perhaps you're skeptical. You may say something like, I can think all I want, but I still get unhappy when he starts to drill. Think back to the stick shift. When did you believe that you could drive it? A thought becomes a belief when you've worked on it repeatedly, not when you simply try it once and use your initial inability as the rationale for giving up. Taking charge of yourself involves more than simply trying on new thoughts for size. It requires a determination to be happy and to challenge and destroy each and every thought that creates a self-immobilizing unhappiness in you. Dechukt. Choice. Your ultimate freedom. If you still believe that you don't choose to be unhappy, try to imagine this course of events. Each time you become unhappy, you are subjected to some treatment you find unpleasant. Perhaps you are locked in a room alone for long periods of time, or conversely forced into a crowded elevator where you must stand for days. You may be deprived of all food or forced to eat some dish you find particularly distasteful, or perhaps you will be tortured, physically tortured by others, rather than mentally tortured by yourself. Imagine that you were subjected to any one of these punishments until you made your unhappy feelings go away. How long do you think you would continue to hold on to them? Chances are you would take control rather quickly. So the issue is not whether you can take control of your feelings, but whether you will. What must you endure before you'll make such a choice? Some people choose to go insane rather than take control. Others merely give up and succumb to a life of misery because the dividend of pity received is greater than the reward of being happy. The issue here is your own ability to choose happiness, or at least not to choose unhappiness at any given moment of your life. A mind-blowing notion, perhaps, but one that you should consider carefully before rejecting, since to discard it is to give up on yourself. To reject it is to believe that someone else instead of you is in charge of you. But choosing to be happy might seem easier than some things which daily confound your life. Just as you are free to choose happiness over unhappiness, so in the myriad events of everyday life, you are free to choose self-fulfilling behavior over self-defeating behavior. If you drive in this day and age, chances are you find yourself frequently stuck in traffic. Do you become angry, swear at other drivers, berate your passengers, take your feelings out on anyone and anything in range? Do you justify your behavior by saying that traffic always sends you into a snit, that you simply have no control in a traffic jam? If so, you're accustomed to thinking certain things about yourself and the way you act in traffic. But what if you decided to think something else? What if you chose to use your mind in a self-enhancing kind of way? It would take time, but you could learn to talk to yourself in new ways, to become accustomed to new behavior, which might include whistling, singing, turning on a tape recorder to write verbal letters, even timing yourself with 30-second postponements of your anger. You have not learned to like the traffic, but you have learned to practice, very slowly at first, new thoughts. You have decided not to be uncomfortable. You have chosen to substitute in slow, progressive steps healthy new feelings and habits for old, self-defeating emotions. You can choose to make any experience enjoyable and challenging. Dull parties and committee meetings are fertile territory for choosing new feelings. When you find yourself bored, you can make your mind work in exciting ways by changing the subject with a key observation, or writing the first chapter of your novel, or working on new plans which will help you to avoid these settings in the future. Using your mind actively means assessing the people and events which give you the greatest difficulty, and then deciding on new mental efforts to make them work for you. In a restaurant, if you typically get upset over poor service, think first of why you should not choose to be upset because someone or something is not going the way you would like it to go. You're too worthy to be upset by someone else, especially someone who is so unimportant in your life. Then devise strategies to change the setting, or leave, or whatever. But don't just get perturbed. Use your brain to work for you, and eventually you'll have the terrific habit of not being upset when things go wrong. Choosing health over illness. You can also choose to eliminate some physical sufferings which are not rooted in a known organic dysfunction. Some common physical ailments, which often do not have an origin in a physiological disorder, include headaches, backaches, ulcers, hypertension, rashes, skin eruptions, cramps, fleeting pains, and the like. I once had a client who swore she had a headache every morning for the past 4 years. Each morning at 6:45, she waited for it to arrive and then took her pain pills. She also kept each of her friends and co-workers informed of how much she was suffering. It was suggested to the client that she wanted the headaches and had actually chosen them as a means of being noticed and as a means of receiving sympathy and pity. It was also suggested that she could learn not to want this for herself and to practice making the headache shift from a point located centrally on her forehead to one on the side of her head. She was going to learn that she controlled the headache by making it move around. The first morning, she awakened at 6:30 a.m. and lay in bed awaiting her headache. When it arrived, she was able to think it to another place in her head. She had chosen something new for herself, and ultimately she stopped choosing headaches completely. There is a burgeoning amount of evidence to support the notion that people even choose things like tumors, influenza, arthritis, heart disease, accidents, and many other infirmities, including cancer, which have always been considered something that just happens to people. In treating what have been labeled terminally ill patients, some researchers are beginning to believe that helping the patient not to want the disease in any form may be a means of ameliorating the internal killer. Some cultures treat pain in this way, taking complete power over the brain and making self-control synonymous with brain control. The brain, which is composed of 10 billion working parts, has enough storage capacity to accept 10 new facts every second. It has been conservatively estimated that the human brain can store an amount of information equivalent to 100 trillion words, and that all of us use but a tiny fraction of this storage space. It is a powerful instrument you carry around with you wherever you go, and you might choose to put it to some fantastic uses which you've never even considered up until now. Keep that in mind as you go through the pages of this book and try to choose new ways of thinking. Don't be too quick to call such control quackery. Most doctors have seen patients who have chosen a physical malady for which there is no known physiological cause. It's not uncommon for individuals to become mysteriously sick when confronted with some kind of difficult circumstance, or to avoid illness when being sick is simply impossible at that time, and so postpone the effects, perhaps the fever, until the big event is over, and then collapse. I know of a case of a 36-year-old man trapped in a horrible marriage. He decided on January 15th that he was leaving his wife on March 1st. On February 28th, he developed a 104-degree fever and began vomiting uncontrollably. This became a recurring pattern. Each time he built himself up, he got the flu or an attack of indigestion. He was making a choice. It was easier to be sick than to face the guilt, fear, shame, and the unknown that go with separation. Listen to the advertisements we see and hear on television. I'm a stockbroker. So you can imagine the tension and headaches I must have. I take this pill to make it go away. Message: you can't control how you feel if you work in certain kinds of jobs, teachers, executives, parents, so rely on something else to do it for you. We are bombarded with messages like this every day. The implication is clear. We are helpless prisoners who must have someone or something else do things for us. Nonsense. Only you can improve your lot or make yourself happy. It is up to you to take control of your own mind and then practice feeling and behaving in the ways that you choose.